I live in a quite small town at the time with a large industrial plant nearby where most of the people work at. But there are a few that don't get their breadcrumbs from legit sources, for example the local gangs. Lucky when they have their dispute, they usually shoot and harasses the other gangs in the area and spare the locals who live there. I have not stumbled upon any unrest in this matter, and have never been in any crossfire before this day. Me and my buddy were preparing to take a long run around town, taking some small roads and trails to get the miles clocked in. We started running some back roads and just enjoying the run and the small talk about some games we played at the time. We took some right and left turns, and after a couple of miles my friend said that he knows a small path to the next neighborhood. It's a path over some train tracks where there usually are no trains running, and it's quite a fun path with some ups and downs. Also, it's a nice forest to be in, a very sparse pine tree forest with some very large trees. We run for like 1 minute on this path, and I can see a bit further down that it's laying a duffel bag under a small bush on the right side of the path. It's a new bag that seems to be full of something. In my head I was thinking at first, it must be someone who had forgotten it there. But then I remembered that this path is not any path someone is going down with a duffel bag. I say to my friend, "Did you see the bag?" And he of course answered, "Yes." Then I asked him, "Shouldn't we look what's inside?" And he answered, "Nah, it's probably nothing inside." So, we continued down the path and didn't think much of it. Now the strange part comes. We have just passed the train tracks, and a couple yards further we see a man standing in a black suit, and seems talking to someone on the phone. He seems quite surprised that we were running there as well as us about he is standing there. He had some black leather gloves on, quite muscular, and the phone looked like the phone you get from a kiosk. My heart had started racing and my adrenaline had started pumping. What is this man going to do with us? He maybe has a weapon on him, I was thinking. No man with a suit has nothing to be here in the forest. But I tried to act cool and nodded him a hi. But he was still on his phone talking to someone, and seemed not touched by us running beside him on the path. A while after we had encountered this strange man in the black suit, we said both ask each other, "What was in that bag?" He must have been searching for that bag. That's when I understood what could have happened to us if we maybe took that bag with us, or maybe searched for the bag's content, and he came strolling down that path. This story still gets me shivers down my spine to this day. But I can't stop thinking about what could have been in this bag. But I know for sure that I don't want to meet this black suit man ever again. A couple years ago, I was stressed out from college and big city life and decided to spend a long weekend in the woods doing what my city friends consider utter lunacy, and us outdoorsy people consider nirvana. Deep woods free camping. In the winter. Alone. While this sounds like the beginning of a missing persons report, if you are an experienced outdoorsman, it's pretty safe. I also take a secret pleasure in being the white trash warrioress my dad always hoped I'd be. I always hated the feeling of claustrophobia that came with being female in the city, avoiding eye contact, not walking alone at night. When you're a girl alone out in the woods, you're in charge. You're safe within the warm embrace of your own solitary freedom. Or so I thought. I spent a few hours on the roads, the surroundings getting wilder and wilder as I drove. I parked in a loud roadside ditch, and with a compass and a map, hiked until I was in a mile's reach or so of some good ice fishing. I was at least 4 miles from the road. I made an extremely discreet camp in a clearing, with just one little hole in the snow for my tiny tent and my tiny campfire. After a couple beautiful days of just hiking and relaxing around camp, I made the trek to the fishing hole. Everything was in utter winter stillness. The air was crisp, and the only signs that I wasn't in a perfect vacuum were the twitterings of birds and the very distant rumblings of the half-frozen waterfalls. After a mile or so of crunching along in the snow, I silently celebrated my compass skills when I came out at the exact place I had intended to. I punched a hole in the thin crust of ice and set to get in my fish on. My first catch came quickly. After a few weeks under a frozen surface, fishes be hungry. I was feeling oddly fatigued and jumpy, so I decided to just clean the fish here and now, and take it straight back to camp to cook. Yummy! I quickly realized my fish preparation skills were rusty at best. I cursed my lack of preparation as I cut myself for the second time. Something in my peripheral senses was irritating me, but I was very set in my task, focusing on the motions in the slippery mess. The thing in periphery was growing more irritating, like the buzzing of a fly or the yammering of a sibling. I cut my hand as the fish slipped out of my hands and into the snow. Frustrated, I shouted, "Stop with that whistling, will you?" Silence resumed. And then my heart stopped. Living in a college neighborhood, I had grown so accustomed to white noise that I had failed to recognize how grossly inappropriate this sound was in this context. The silence weighed down on me as I broke into a sweat. The only reason a human would be this deep in the woods would be to hunt. And no hunter would give himself away like that. And if he was whistling for any other reason, shouldn't he have reacted to my outburst? Yelled something vulgar back? Apologized? No. Nothing. Just the total stillness of the woods. Silence as pure as it was before I spoke. Unsure if I had misheard the twitterings of a bird or something, I just decided the fish was a lost cause, slung my gear over my shoulder, and headed for camp. I trudged off in the woods, and about a quarter mile from camp, I saw a large mass protruding from the snow. Apprehensive but drawn, like a moth to the flame, I trudged up to what materialized in the closing distance as a moose kill. A really good moose kill. A clean shot through the upturned eye, staring at me. Staring at me and saying something. Saying something that was imposing a sense of dread on me, but a dread I couldn't translate. I ran. I ran hard and I ran fast. In the snow and the woods, everything looked the same. I knew I was moving south, and I knew I'd be past camp on the east. I made for the road, eventually slowing down to a weary trudge, calming at the comforting sight of the woods clearing ahead to make way for the country roadway. I looked to my left and saw my car 50 yards or so down, jogged to it, and drove the lonely 15 miles to the first motel I saw signs for. I had none of my belongings and no earthly idea why I had just abandoned ship like that. It was only as I was sitting up watching infomercials that night that it started to fall together. Why would the Park Service issue free camp passes for the same stretch of woods that they allowed hunting? The moose defied everything of my rudimentary understanding of hunting. Even with the snow to cool it, decomp starts quickly on an animal that size. You'd have time for a few quick pictures, but you'd want to have it dressed quickly. Why would you kill a moose 5 miles into the forest? How could you ever drag it back to the road? In the morning, in a sleep-deprived and paranoid state, I described everything I'd seen and thought I heard to a very confused park ranger. He seemed more vexed about illegal hunting than any of my crazy city girl ramblings. He said he wanted to come pick me up and have me take him to where I thought the kill site was. I said I was only going if he brought a gun. He sighed with exasperation and told me when to meet him. We rode out into the woods on an ATV, with me awkwardly riding on the back as if on the back of the world's awkwardest motorcycle. We got to a large impression in the snow where the moose had been. Blood was everywhere. There was also the distinct track of the moose being dragged. The drag marks made a smooth trail in the snow, as if the moose were on a tarp. The ranger said he should take me back now. He asked where my camp was. I pointed in the direction of the drag marks. It looked like he was finally sharing in my unease. Back at the hotel, I washed my clothes in the sink and pre-ordered to drive home in the morning. An unknown number called my phone. It was the park ranger. The moose had been dragged to my campsite. He described the scene as a huge mess. But the next thing he said sent chills down my spine. Someone had cut into my tent with a knife. I asked about the rest of my belongings. He said darkly, "You don't want them back." So, what happens now? Well, miss, we're just gonna keep an eye out for this guy. I haven't heard of or seen anything like this ever before. I'm really sorry this happened. And that was it. No closure. No explanation. In the years that have passed, I've tried every different application of reason. A hunter who needed help, but knew I was already gone. A deranged psychopath looking to make his second kill? One of the few friends I shared the story with envisioned him as some deep woods Sweeney Todd. He dubbed him Moosey Todd. I still don't know why I didn't hear the gunshot. The whistling seems so vivid in my memory, but was it even real? One question has been definitely answered. I'll never go into the woods alone again.